Hi. Welcome back, everyone. I'm about 3/4 of the way through restoring this 1984 Toyota stereo. This came out of and I've talked about this before on my channel. This radio actually goes into a car that was actually featured on a Donut Media video. It's the Toyota AE86, which I believe is a US Toyota Corolla S or GTS, I believe. I'm not a Toyota nut, so I don't know their special editions and such, but the owner of that car reached out to me to restore this radio, and I've already gone and polished the faceplate. We have recapped the entire chassis. Every capacitor in this entire system has been replaced. It sounds amazing. This radio is exactly the same age I am. It was made in May of 1984, and so was I. So what I wanted to show you guys in this video is a unique... Now, this is one of those lost technologies. I don't believe there are any production radios of any kind that use this particular system. What am I talking about? Not just an analog tuner, but an analog tuner with 3 FM presets and 2 AM presets, and they are mechanical. It is the coolest mechanism that you'll ever find on a radio like this. These were once ubiquitous. Every car from the 1950s well into the 80s had a system like this, unless the radio was equipped with a digital tuner. This is often called a slide rule tuner or just an analog tuner. And fun fact, I once owned an aftermarket stereo that had a analog tuner. It was a rotary variable capacitor style, which is irrelevant here, but it had a digital readout. And it was about as accurate as you're probably thinking. It wasn't. Anyway, I wanted to show you how this mechanism works and what it does. And most folks who are probably younger than 50, maybe 45, younger than 45, may have never seen one of these before. And if they have, they don't remember it. And if they've seen this, they don't realize what it can do. So that's why I'm making this video. So I'm going to, and I have to give a shout out to the owner of this unit for choosing to preserve the analog tuner in his 1984 Toyota, because this is cool. I'm so happy to take this job on. I have had so much fun doing this. These radios were built way different from the ones that I'm used to working on, and they're actually harder to work on. They were not... I mean, everything is kind of crammed in there. Fortunately, everything is plugged in. I didn't have to desolder anything to take it apart. But earlier models, you would have to start desoldering and notating wire locations because they didn't use plugs. But back then, at least this one had plugs. Okay, let's get started. So how this works, I'm going to prop my phone right here in my Luxo lamp, which has a magnifier. There we go. I'm going to try to demonstrate this. All right, I'm going to shut the radio off because I don't want to accidentally touch the back end of a capacitor here. So how this works is you select a station, let's say station 99, okay? And I want that to be preset number 1 for the FM band. Remember, we're on the FM band right now. We'll go over AM in a minute. On this particular radio, to save, maybe to save buttons, they're using the presets, and I've seen this before on, I believe, GM radios of this vintage. But what they've done is they have allocated only 4 of these presets to the FM band. See, they're clearly notated, and 2 of them are on the AM band. That's important, because to select the band, you have to press one of the FM presets. Okay, so I want to set 99 megahertz as my first preset. So I'm going to take the first FM preset, and I'm going to pull it out. And I'm then going to push it back in all the way, just like that. Now, I want my second preset to be 88. I want my second one, so I'm going to pull the second one out, and I'm going to press it in all the way. And I'm going to show you how this works. It is so simple. It's genius. Now, the third one, I'm going to set it to 108, which is on the other end of the slide rule. So, it doesn't quite go that far. See, these analog tuners were more of a guide. They weren't precise, but they're reliable and they work. So, we're going to press that in. And there's not a lot that really goes wrong with these, other than maybe, you know, debris gets in there. Third one, the fourth and last one, we're going to set it to 95, or whatever this position is. So I'm going to pull it out, press it in. So now, first preset, now watch the slide rule. Boom, it slides over. Third preset, it slides over. What kind of mechanical wizardry is making this all work, you might be wondering. Well, I'll show you in a second. Now, AM. As soon as I press one of these two unlabeled presets, it automatically switches to the AM band, and then I can choose up to 2 positions as AM presets. We'll do 65. Pull and push, and it remembers that position. And the second one, we're going to set to 130. Pull and push. So now, bing, bong. Now I press FM, the band selection goes straight to FM, and I can choose my 4 favorite stations. Pretty cool, right? Well, I just happen to have one that's all torn apart here. So with this this has been a unique project. I don't typically take these on. This was a special case. This guy reached out to me, and he was very, very cordial, understanding. He understood, like, you know, this is like a passion project. This car, like, he was very emphatic about how much he loves this car. He then sent me the video where it was featured on the Donut channel on YouTube. And I saw the car in the video, and I'm like, you know, I've got to help this guy. I love what he's doing. This is a vehicle that is the same age as me. And, well, the car's an 85 model year, but they were produced in 84. And I just saw the care and attention that went into his restoration. And I'm like, I kind of want to take on more of these. And I said, you know what? I'll do it. So I charged him my rate that I typically charge a Mazda sensory sound system restoration. And I told him, I said, you know, in order for me to do this, we need to make sure we can get parts for this thing, because we needed parts. I talked about this in my first video on this one, but here's the cassette deck. The original cassette deck had cracked gears and the take up and supply reels, and because of that, there's no way in hell that the drive gear would ever mesh properly, and it would just get worse. So I said, you know what? Let's try to find another stereo that we can pull parts from. We ended up getting one that was in better cosmetic condition overall, but it was a different version. It was a slightly newer version, and I found a lot of subtle design changes and improvements, in fact, in that one. But ultimately, we chose to stick with this unit here. And I took some of the components. For example, all of these push buttons are from the donor radio. The original ones for this radio were chrome plated. And when you chrome plate plastic, it looks good in the showroom, but beyond that, it doesn't last. And you can see there's bubbling on the chrome. We're going to save these, but, you know, ultimately they will never look good again. And I could paint, if we had no other option, I could paint them, but it wouldn't, I don't think it would have the same appeal. But it's a slightly different shade, slightly brighter. I think this actually looks better. and I believe he agrees. Anyway, so let's get to how this all works. I'm using my solder as an antenna for now. This radio, I'm telling you guys, this thing sounds better, has more punch and more oomph than any of the Miata radios I've worked on that are 10 years newer. And they were just built better, I guess. The one thing that, before we get into it, these cassette decks are horrible. I don't like these. I got this one working so I had to take parts from the parts unit. I took actually I took the whole deck and I swapped a few parts over. But the clutches were a major problem with this one. It had too little pressure or too little tension, and it wasn't driving the take-up or supply reels correctly, and it was eating tapes. So I took the clutch apart and I fiddled with it a little bit. I cleaned it and readjusted the tension springs, and I got it. It took about 5 tries, but I got it to where it'll play a tape correctly at the correct speed, and it won't eat it. So, and that was one of the stipulations. He wanted the cassette deck to work, and I totally get that. That's why I'm in this business. And anyway, on with the show. So if you're familiar with a wiffle tree mechanism, this is what's used in the IBM Selectric typewriters, if you've ever seen how those work. It's where 3 moving components can be manipulated by one yoke or push bar, and the angle of that push bar changes the outcome of those other 2 moving components. So let me demonstrate that right now. Okay, so this tuner, let me zoom in a little bit. There we go, let's get a good view of it. So this is the bottom of the tuning mechanism. Now, on these push-button tuners, there's no rotary capacitor like you might have seen in, say, a cheap portable stereo or really most rotary knob tuners. The way this one works, and this is a cool bit of engineering too, there is a drive shaft. Here, we'll peel some parts away here. This is a drive shaft with a universal joint that drives this gear, which has a slip clutch in there, so you can't break the tuner if you turn it all the way one direction or the other. See how it just kind of slips, so it's no longer moving. Now, you'll notice as I turn the dial, there is a mechanism that goes across here, and it's actually 2 bars. And if you look at it just right, you can see that there's 2 bars that are attached to a fulcrum or a pivot point here. And they're kind of doing this, like that. Like this. So that's important. So that's tied to the mechanism. Now, inside here are 5, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Are there 5? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6. 6 plungers. Now, there's 6 plungers. Now, these are going to be a kind of like a tuning slug, like a core. I think it's a ferrite core that slides in and out of a coil, and those coils are then tied together in such a way so that, well, we won't have to really dive in too much in that because I don't fully understand it myself. I'm not an engineer. But those are a different type of a variable capacitor. And they all work together to cover the entire bandwidth of the AM and the FM frequencies. So there's probably some crossover, like one of them will one controls the extreme high end and one controls the extreme low end and everything in the middle. So you get the ability to tune all the frequencies that are allocated to the FM band and the AM band as well. So for that to work, those coils have to move in and out in unison. And you'll notice there's little adjustment screws here. Don't touch those unless you have there's actually a FM and an AM transmitter, a frequency generator, so you can make sure that every frequency tunes incorrectly. Not incorrectly, but tunes correctly. There we go. Okay, enough of that. So that bar goes like that. And when you push one of these push buttons, you'll notice it has to touch the bar. I can get a closer look at this. There's a good angle of it. Do you see these guys right here? Okay. Now what those do is when I press one of these buttons, it is going to push on either the top. So that actually continues on. It looks like a seesaw. You'll see it actually continues on the top and the bottom. What it is a half moon piece of stamped sheet metal, and it presses against. Which one am I on here? It's going to press against the bar. Let's see if we can get a good shot of that action. See, it presses against the bar, and the top and the bottom touch, because now that bar has moved to a position where it can touch both. Now this one here is set to a different frequency, and watch this. Boom. Let's try to find a more extreme one here. Okay, this one's unlocked, so I'm going to lock it. Actually, what I'm going to do is change the position. So what if I have it tuned all the way to 88 megahertz? And I want this right here to be the 88 megahertz preset. So if I press down on it, the first thing it does is it switches the bandwidth to FM, or the band to FM. See how there's a difference there? See, look at that. See, let's just demonstrate that one more time. Watch that. See that? Okay, perfect. So now you get what it's doing. What if I want to select? There we go. I'll change it to 88. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out, and that's going to unlock. Come on in. That's going to unlock that little half moon piece right there. See how it's completely free now. Look at that. Completely free. Now, when I press this back into position, magical thing happens. Watch this. It automatically, see, because it's free, now it can conform to where that bar is currently positioned. And remember, the position of this bar and the one below it, because they're connected, also corresponds to the position of the tuning slugs. When I press this back in, it locks that half moon in place. So that half moon, kind of like one of those, you know, those pin toys, where it's like an entire array of a grid of pins, and you can kind of make it conform to any shape you want it to. Kind of works the same way. But now that is locked, so when I go to, say, another position on the dial, oops, these are all unlocked. Hold on. So let's just, for visual sake, let's position this to the other end of the dial, 108 or so. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So I'm going to unlock this one, and I'm going to press it back in. See how it moved? Just like that. And now when I press this one over here, woo, and then I press this one over here, it's fun. Look at that. See how it moves? Just like that. And that's how those work. I hope that makes sense. It's brilliantly simple. And it's actually, I believe, a form of wiffle tree mechanism or wiffle tree computer. And it's this mechanical ingenuity that won World War II. I mean, somebody had to dream this up and think about a way for the tuners to be quickly, I mean, not only the ability to set a preset. Let me show you another form of preset since we're on the subject. So an earlier form of preset dial was this Grunow teledial. And how this one worked is when you bought the radio, you would set it up. You get a sheet of cardboard circles with all your local stations, and you'd actually take this dial face off. You would disassemble each key and put whichever radio station you wanted, but you had to put them in sequence. So you couldn't do, let's say, 90 kilohertz over here, and then you had to do it. So you do is you press this in, and it would stop at whatever station it was programmed to, just like a rotary dial. But each one, they had to be in order, is what I'm saying. They couldn't be out of order. They had to be in a very specific sequence. And it worked in both directions, actually. Well, like that. And really, this is a very simple mechanism. When you press that in, there's a pin that corresponds to a very specific location at the rear of the dial. Now, to fine-tune them, you had to, I'd have to actually show you how this works, but these pins could be positioned in a series of holes that was in a circle, and each position would move the dial just a little bit. So if it was, just a tick too far this way, you could rotate that key. And then the radio had built-in compensating circuitry. So if it was close to a station, it would automatically compensate, and the dial would electronically drift to the strongest point of that part of the dial. This technology was state-of-the-art in 1936 when this radio was made. Anyway, so what you're seeing here is kind of the very tail end of these mechanical push-button tuners. And as time progressed into the 80s, I believe most of these push-button tuners were dropped for lower cost, just plain old rotary tuners without presets. And the emerging replacement was this. This is basically a radio from the same series, but this is the digital version. And again, I have to credit the owner of this car for not opting for this solution, rather keeping the old-fashioned radio instead. Now, we are going to be modifying this radio to actually have a Bluetooth module, and this is kind of exciting for me. It'll be the first analog tuner that I have modified. And the way I'm going to do it is actually through the cassette deck harness, which I have to reverse engineer. There are no schematics available to me. I have been looking and looking and looking. Thankfully, I actually have another harness, so I don't have to chop up his, modify it, and then have to fix it in the end. So we're going to modify a different harness without affecting his original one. The device, the Bluetooth module, is actually going to fit right in here. That's my goal. I still need to recap this board, that and this one as well. There really aren't that many on this one, but this one's getting recapped. When I did the job, this is what I got so far. These are all the parts that I replaced. This was a bad, this actually stopped working as I was setting things up on the radio. So another 80, this is kind of neat too. Another 1980s hallmark of these especially OEM stereos were recessed and hidden control knobs. And what you would do I believe Chrysler still used these well into the 2000s, but you would just press on them and they would retract. It's a neat feature. You don't see that anymore. But, yeah, one of those had failed to function. It just would not stay retracted. It wouldn't retract, so I replaced the whole thing. But thankfully, we had a parts radio that we could just yank parts out of. I am very happy that we had that. Otherwise, restorations like this often aren't possible unless you have parts. If you don't have parts, you've got to rethink the plan. It was so bad that we actually looked at possibly having these gears reproduced. And that's where I was going with it at first. And it did not need to happen, thankfully, because resin-printed gears will never last as long as nylon. Nylon is bad enough as it is. We don't need to make things worse. I gotta put these screws back in for the... Anyway, so that's it. That's where we're at with this one. I love this radio. I really do. You know, this thing sounds better than my 2022 CX5 radio. Of course, the bar is really low on that one because it's a crappy stereo to begin with, but man, this thing packs a punch. It really does. And, yeah. So, that's what we got for you. And, hope you guys... Actually, just shout out to Abraham. Dude, you're going to love this. I know you're thinking about it now. You're going to love this radio because I love this radio. It is so simple, so form over function over form, sorry. So function over form. It's just incredible. And it sounds so good. We had a little bit of crackling in the rotary pots for all four of these. But I was able to work that out with Deoxid D100. I love the D100 because it doesn't make a mess. It's just a minimal little metered spray. I love that stuff. Anyway, I think we're done with the head unit now. Now all of our efforts are going to go into the cassette deck, which is where we're going to put the Bluetooth module. It's going to require an external switch. Unfortunately, there is no way around that on this one. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. So we're gonna have to put an external switch, which I've got to tell you about, by the way. So anyway, so that's all I got for now. Oh, and V Westlife pointed this out when he watched my last video. This guy right here, this is a trim adjuster for the antenna. It's supposed to be adjusted to match the antenna to the vehicle or something like that. It actually led to a very nerve-wracking moment during the restoration. I'd plugged everything in. I had just finished the cap job. Everything was done. I'm reassembling the radio. And I plug it in. I'm not getting anything. I'm getting a little bit of static out of the tuner, but that's it. And I'm starting to panic. I'm like, oh my God, what now? What could possibly have gone wrong? Well, little did I know, this little red wire came undone. Why is my butterscotch meowing at me? Butterscotch, I'm over here. Come on. Why are you meowing at me? Well, anyway. So, I actually started taking everything apart and double checking my work, making sure the capacitors are all in the correct order and everything was done like I was supposed to. And then I noticed that was unplugged. I'm like, I wonder. Just resolder it back on, and sure enough, she woke up. Okay, that's all I got for you guys now. Thank you for watching, and subscribe now, please. I'd love it.